Good evening. Tonight is Monday, June 20th, and we do have a quorum, so I will call this meeting to order. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We will now vote to approve the agenda for the evening. Is Michael available online? He is not. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? The agenda is approved. Dr. Stanley, would you please review tonight's agenda for us?
Absolutely. We have quite a bit going on. We are going to have excellence in action, and then we move into discussion on, my evaluation. And then we get an overview around our work around the comprehensive literacy plan, a lot of the work that's been done around the assessment plan. We're getting a STEAM update. We have some policies that we have under review. And then we move to action. We have our budget. We're looking at long-term facility finance. We have our food service management contract that we are bringing before the board proposal, and then some more work around policy. We'll have our updates. I'll give an update, and we'll be done for the evening.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. First thing on our agenda is our Excellence in Action, and tonight's Excellence in Action, we're going to hear about community education summer programming. Programs began last week with summer camps including cooking, career exploration, Spanish, science, Legos, bicycle repair, and all types of sports. We welcome Cheryl Gunnis, the Community Involvement Programs Coordinator, to tell us what's ahead. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting.
I think you need, oh, there we go.
We're going to start with a 30-second video. Thank you. So I want to give a little shout out to our summer communications intern, Kelly Rash, who will be preparing a sort of weekly summary every week, and we're sharing that with all the families who participated as well as on our social media channel. So that was the first one that she completed from last week. As far as Excellence in Action, I wanted to give you a little summary of our summer enrichment enrollments. So this snapshot shows you from 2017, which is when my role expanded and I took over leading the summer enrichment team. You'll see the dip in COVID, and one thing I'm proud of on that graph is that we were able to basically replicate 2017 even in 2020. And this year, in 2022, enrollments are still rolling in. We currently have over 7,000 enrollments and 458 camps over the 10 weeks this summer. And in order to manage that volume, we have a full-time staff, enrichment supervisors, 3 people who are managing preschool through adult enrollments year-round. We have 17 additional seasonal enrichment staff, 84 independent contractors, and 32 middle school and high school volunteers who are helping us deliver all these great experiences for students. And one more thing I wanted to point out that I'm really proud of on this graph is that in 2021, we were asked to take over the Early Learning Center preschool enrichment programs. So we're very proud of how we've been able to grow that. This year, we're up to about 700 enrollments of preschoolers doing summer camps. And next year, the Early Learning Center will reassume responsibility for that programming, but we feel like we've given them a really great platform to grow from. So that's a little bit about the quantity of our programs, and then the quality. So every week at the end of programs, we send out a survey to our participants and ask them to give feedback on our programs. So 119 people have given us feedback on the first 2 weeks of programming. You'll see that of those 66% gave us 10 out of 10, and another 13 gave us 9 out of 10. So I would say, given that we're just getting our groove in, trying to figure out our processes and protocols and so on, I really would celebrate that quality. And I did a little word cloud of the narratives that people shared with us. I would say there are kind of 3 themes of the feedback that we're getting. One is that the kids came home smiling even if they were reluctant at first, and were asking when they could sign up for their next camp. Families and parents seem very pleased with the mix of activities and that we're keeping kids engaged, and they're happy with what they're learning, but also happy with the rain and heat backups that we're providing, and just basically that we're there. And third, they're really impressed with the staff, and I'm going to just say a little bit more about that in a second. Yes, these are the kind of comments that we get. They had a blast, came home so dirty and tired in a good way, pumped and just excited all around, and really providing peace of mind for parents. And a few more highlights. So in terms of making sure that everyone is able to participate in our programs, I prepared this slide a little bit earlier, but for this year we have 162 students who are taking advantage of our partnership with Edina Give and Go and doing scholarships. 162 students in 333 different camps, and $59,402 of scholarships have been given out so far this summer. And to compare to, again, back to the 2017, we had 70 students and 34,000 at that time. So we've also been able to really grow the number of students who we're reaching in that way too. And then 104 students have chosen Edina Community Ed for their recovery services or extended school year programming, as opposed to other options that they had. So we're really excited to be able to incorporate them in our summer enrichment camps. I wanted to share 3 things about ways that we're innovating this year. So one challenge that we have is sort of the shoulder season, like the weeks when school is out, but teachers are still in their classrooms trying to wrap up the year, or at the end of summer when new teacher training starts and we're not able to really be in the buildings and take advantage of the space. So this year we collaborated with our Kids Club colleagues, and we made out and about weeks for the first and last week of summers, where we just had kids. We had 5 different camps going out on field trips every day, all week. So we had 378 campers sort of extending that summer. Parents were very, very grateful that we had a place for kids to go and ways for them to be out and about in the community. 10 expeditions, and those are for elementary and middle schoolers. The second great thing that we're doing this summer is we've reignited our aquatics program. So we haven't been able to have an aquatics program for a couple of years because of construction in our pools and COVID. This year, we were able to reignite that program. 220 kids are now taking swimming lessons this summer, which we have a lot of demand for that. And you probably have all heard about lifeguard shortages, and so the way we solved that is we identified some of our returning rec leaders, and we sent them to lifeguard camp, and we sent them to water safety instructor camp, so we're able to have this aquatics program this year. And then as far as our staff and volunteers, I really can't say enough. We are continuing our practice this summer of hiring Edina High School students and recent grads. And this is a leadership opportunity for those students, but it's also such a huge win for our program. One mom wrote, my daughter loves to dance and hang out with kids her own age, but she really loved the interaction with the high school students. Every year, and it's already happened, our rec leaders are getting invited to Buzz Lightyear birthday parties. There have been a few marriage proposals from elementary kids to the high schoolers, and many parents and grandparents begging for phone numbers for babysitters because they see the way that they're engaging with those younger kids. So I think that's really a great element of our program, too, that doesn't always get celebrated enough. We do have challenges. Construction and parking lots, especially at Edina High School, have been challenging. We are continually problem solving and improving, and things are definitely much better this week than they were last week. Staffing is generally a problem, not necessarily in our program, although it is, but when other programs have problems with staff, then our staff gets spread more thin. Sharing spaces is always difficult, and there are a lot of programs and a lot of competition for space. And right now, we are also trying to get our fall catalog out because registration for fall will begin soon. So, but things are going well, and our whole team, I'm so proud of them. Our original plan was to have some of our young staff people here tonight with me, and it's been a very long and very hot Monday, and Mondays, we get a new crop of kids and families every Monday. So Mondays are a lot of logistics and a lot of time in parking lots, so I didn't want to ask them to come back. But they are amazingly flexible and committed to saying yes and being welcoming and being problem-solving and solution-finding and keeping our interactions with kids and families first. So that's a little snapshot of how summer is going. Any questions?
Do board members have any questions? Yes, Jeannie?
Mine's not so much a question, but just I want to give you a shout out for your partnership with our Special Education Advisory Council with our parents and staff. There are some amazing unified summer camps available this summer that I know the one my son was interested already has a long wait list, but yeah, I just want to say I'm so thankful for your partnership and the work you did to create that opportunity during the summer, because I think that means so much to so many kids to have that option.
And that partnership has helped our programs get better and stronger, and it benefits everyone, so.
I was just going to say thank you. When you see that enrollment, that is really exciting to see that that many kids are engaged in programming and you're offering programs that families want to be a part of. And you and I have worked in the past together, and I cannot say how much I appreciate your innovation and your ability to meet our families and our students with really fun programming, and it has not always been easy. So you continue to do an excellent job. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you. It's really, again, it's really an amazing team, a big, amazing team. And when I think about when I lie in bed exhausted at night, it's like there was a little boy named Luca today who was so excited. His entire body was just radiating. He was so excited to be at contraptions class. And there was another girl who came up for Spanish, and she was like, I can't wait to learn Spanish. And it was just very, it's exciting to see that. So it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, can I ask, I echo what my colleague said.
Thank you.
But I have
You're
a
very
question. Will you be adding any more camps throughout the summer, or are you guys set for the summer and then that's it? Yeah, okay.
In theory, in like January and September, when we started planning summer, we tried to, kind of imagine us all working at 85%, right? So that we could have, just kind of match what we did last summer, try to have room to be able to problem solve, think forward, innovate, and so on. And the demand is just so huge that we are really operating beyond capacity right now. And to add things in the middle of the summer, it just isn't, it doesn't let us provide really high-quality customer service in the planning, and that's when logistics get dropped. And so we're not adding anymore right now, but.
Great. I was curious. I knew that you had the summer planned out, but I know there's been times in the past where there have been some additions. So I think that's great, and thank you for all your work and your staff.
Thank you.
My heart is
Yeah,
in
it's an
community
amazing
ed, so
team.
It is.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you as well. I mean, I looked to the catalog and the innovation of it compared to when my kids were younger and whatever else is absolutely amazing. And so I think it's great work that you've been doing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo the thanks and also give a special shout out to the members of your team that have been directing traffic all week. So I
Were you
appreciate
at the
it.
high school, or?
As having a student at the high school doing this, I genuinely do appreciate them taking their time and being out there,
Thank you.
knowing that's not part of what they probably signed up for.
I
So
appreciate it.
make
and
sure you
it's-
thank them for doing that.
I will pass that along. It is, it's very stressful, and there are a lot of programs, and community ed is often the one that's front and center and trying to answer questions. And
Yes, so-
and direct traffic and keep people safe. And
Yes. Yeah.
most families have been super patient and understand we're doing the best we can. So we really appreciate that, too.
Yes, and it's not community ed's fault that there's construction. So just thank the individuals directing traffic. So, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have any community comments tonight, so we are going to move to our consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? Actually, I wanted to move the Fraser contracts from the consent agenda. First, we will approve the consent agenda and then approve the Fraser contracts. We will now vote. Really, is Michael on at all? I'm just going to assume that he's in France, just so everyone knows. So,
Make a motion for the consent.
yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We will now vote to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the Fraser March 2022 addendum, additional clinician, the Fraser Summer 2022 contract, and the Fraser 2022-2023 contracts?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. I pulled these off the consent agenda so Dr. Stanley could explain the differences in these contracts and then also articulate for the community the role Edina Education Fund plays in funding these.
Well, I will start with Edina Education Fund. We are so fortunate because in order to bring on the clinicians, we need seed money to bring them on, to get them trained, to get them acclimated into our system. And the Edina Education Fund provides that funding in order for us to do that. And that is really important. We just wouldn't be able to bring them on. So I'd like to go through each one of the contracts separately. And I'm going to start with, if you could pull out amendment number 1, Addendum B, which is signed on May 5th of 2022. This contract represents one clinician, and we have made the payments over the year for that clinician. Two payments were made in late October, early November, and then a payment on February 8th, and a payment on March 20th. So that represents one clinician. I know it could be a little confusing because the next contract was also signed on May 5th. That is an entirely different clinician. So it's the second clinician. So that first clinician contract was paid. In order to get a better understanding with this, I did call Jeff Jorgensen. He's doing well, by the way, out in Washington. He said it was only 75 degrees out there today. I spoke with Bailey Nash in our business office. I spoke with Jana Dengel, who is the administrative assistant. And then I also called Dr. Eric Jensen from Fraser, who works on the contracts, who works with all school districts and worked directly with Jeff on this contract. So I can make sure that I had the clarity that I needed. So then we'll move to the contract amendment number 2, Addendum C. I have confirmed that although that contract started later in the year, so, there's a shortage for employees, there's a shortage for therapists, and we had postings out there focused on these clinicians all throughout the year, and it just took a long time to get them hired. So by the time we got clinician number 2 hired, it was well into the spring. Had we gotten them hired early, we would have had them all year long. What I confirmed with Dr. Jensen is that that $20,000, we will not have to repay that $20,000 again next year because we brought them on so late in the year. He had agreed, and Jeff told me this, that Dr. Jensen, that Fraser, their CFO, they agreed that we will not have to repay that $20,000. So we have also made payments toward that clinician contract already in April and May. For the April and May payments, we made that on May 17th. And for the May payment, the 31st, we are the invoice is forthcoming for the June payment. And then within that contract, you will see that there's $27,000. That is for June and July summer programming. So what Dr. Jensen explained is that they actually have staff members that are helping to support through for mental health. During the summer, they have, it's 8 individuals, not 8 full-time FTE, but 8 individuals that will provide up to 30 hours of support in the month of June and July, and that is what that additional $27,000 is for. And again, that invoice is forthcoming. And then finally, the last contract that I'll have you pull up is the 2022-2023 contract for site-based mental health. That is an additional 3rd clinician. Again, this is, we've been hearing all year long that there's a greater demand. Our families are asking for access to mental health services, on-site co-located services. So that is an additional clinician, and that is to be billed for next school year. And you'll notice that the extended school year during the summer and offering those mental health supports in 2023, there will be an additional $27,000 that we will pay for that, in addition to the $20,000 fee to get that clinician started. And again, that is, the $20,000 startup fee is a partnership with Edina Education Fund.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. I wanted to make sure the board and community understood that each separate $20,000 payment was an additional practitioner that would be in our schools, and understood the dynamic at play between our district and the Edina Education Fund. So are there questions about this specifically?
Yeah, if I could ask, that is excellent that we've been able to bring on 3 clinicians, and I know that the hang-up was just being able to find the staff to fill those positions. Do you know if that will eliminate some of the wait lists? I know that we've had such great demand for those co-located services. Do you know where we're at in terms of servicing students, or will we not really know until we're into the next school year?
I do not have the details on that right now. I know that we had significant wait lists, and it seemed like whenever we were able to bring a clinician on, Jeff would say that there was more interest. And part of that is the trust that Fraser in the co-located services brings to our system. I think parents just become, they trust our system more to offer those services. We can look into that in the fall, though, and just maybe even provide an update on the services that are being provided to our students.
That'd be great. And I know as word of mouth spreads, too, from families to families, that we have that available, I think that's also increased as people have become aware that we have that. And I know the families that I've spoken to have said, just cannot say enough positive things about being able to access that at school, and also what that relationship has meant for their kids. So I'm really proud that we're able to do that work.
I am too, and I should say, now these are contracts for onboarding clinicians and the summer programming. We do have, I learned, 8 clinicians in our schools, so 5 additional clinicians that have already been onboarded. And again, we just cannot thank Edina Education Fund enough for the funding that we're receiving to help support the mental health of our students. So,
anything else before we vote to approve them? Okay, all those in favor of approving the Fraser March 2022 addendum for the additional clinician, the summer 2022 contract, and the 2022-2023 contracts, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The Fraser contracts are approved. Moving on to our discussion items. The first is a proposal for an updated superintendent contract. Evaluation, not contract. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh, and process description. This was brought to the board in a work session. Dr. Stanley is well versed in what this is and supports it. So we've discussed this once before. The key things that I wanted to point out and why this is being proposed is to really have tangible measurements in the superintendent goals and evaluation, and have those two things align when it's applicable, but then also make sure that there is common understanding and agreement as to how the superintendent can meet the goals. So if you notice on page 288, it says what the goal is, and then it lists what the evidence will be of performance, and then it actually defines what does highly effective mean, what does effective mean, what does developing, and what does ineffective mean. And so there's common understanding amongst all the people that will be evaluating the superintendent, what do all of those things mean before the school year starts and the evaluation year starts. So we don't get to the end of the year and one person's effective is another person's ineffective. So that's really the why we're suggesting these changes. And again, Dr. Stanley supports them, and this was discussed before. So I just wanted to point that out. Did anyone have anything to add?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
First of all, I think this is fabulous, and thank you to the governance team who put this together. My question revolves more around what, if any, changes do we need to talk about as a board to how this will affect the time that we need to put into creating this each year, right? Like, I think this will be a longer process, but well worth it. Do we need to look at adding a meeting? Do we need to look at giving ourselves enough time to have this be what we want it to be and accomplish what we want it to accomplish?
Yes, absolutely. And this was part of why the goal-setting process got moved to the board retreat as opposed to a work session to give us some extended time. But I assume that we're going to have to follow that up with some discussions and then potentially some maybe offsite work with governance that brings it back, because I think it's going to be an iterative process potentially. And I also think that we might not have magic year one. So I think that we should do our best to get it right year one, but it's probably might take a little while to build this into a perfect evaluation process.
So when we approve our meetings for the next year, is it wrong to think or even just suggest that we add a meeting at that time to make sure we've given ourselves enough time so that we don't run into the situation of like, we don't have enough, we aren't giving ourselves enough time with pre-planned meetings to get this accomplished?
I would like to see what we get accomplished in our retreat and the follow-up meeting after that.
Okay.
And then absolutely,
Okay.
if we need to, I don't want to get behind so we have a meeting we're not anticipating. So, but I think that's excellent feedback.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We're going to move on to our comprehensive literacy plan to get an update on that. I believe we have Director of Teaching and Learning, Jody D. St. Hubert, Bethany Van Osdel, Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning. Welcome.
The presentation?
It is.
Okay. Okay, good evening, Dr. Stanley, Chair Ellenberg, Board Directors. We are here tonight to give an update on our Early Learning through 12 Comprehensive Literacy Plan. The update builds on the previous updates that we've provided this year, and the highlights are new information since the 131-22 report. With me tonight is Bethany Van Osdel, our Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning, and I'm going to turn it over to her to highlight the presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to share the many successes that we have been able to accomplish in the first year of the Comprehensive Literacy Plan. I think it's important to just remind ourselves what is a comprehensive literacy plan. So I'm just going to read off page 8 really quickly of the Comprehensive Literacy Plan. It says, definition of comprehensive literacy. There may be no greater purpose for an educational system than to ensure all learners have equitable access to evidence-based instruction, building language and literacy knowledge as well as the skills and strategies to competently engage in relevant learning opportunities that foster success. Literacy is a continuous developmental progression from birth through adulthood. Comprehensive literacy is a culmination of enduring and current research, proven instructional design, which you'll hear about tonight, and delivery, with targeted interventions that result in developing learners with the ability to strategically apply reading, writing, speaking, listening, and viewing. I know that's a lot, but it's important for us to remember just
the massive undertaking that when we think about comprehensive literacy. And with that, I want to actually start by having us go backwards for just a minute to the beginning of the year. It's been a year. It's been a year. We started the year this year with kindergarten, first, and second graders who had not had a normal school year. We started the year, last year at this time, I think we thought we were going to start the year in a very different place. And so while we were all internalizing that we were not quite finished with the changes and adjustments that we were going to have to make, educators knew that we were going to be faced with a reality with our students that we just didn't know what to anticipate. And I chose this graphic to just really illustrate the fact that the resilience that our students and our staff and our families have shown this year has just been outstanding. And I think about when we were in the middle of distance learning and we heard kids are resilient. They're resilient. They'll bounce, especially the young ones, you know. And what we learned is some do, but many need intentional data and assessment, targeted instructional match to make that resiliency really a reality. And I think about, I was kind of processing why I think, we really saw the resilience here in Edina. And I think on the one hand, it was the leadership that we have. Dr. Stanley and Dr. Smozel and Jody and our literacy coaches supported us and encouraged us and motivated us and pushed us. And I think about how that just really helped us feel safe in wrapping our arms around something we just didn't know before. And then I think about our teachers and how we started. My first few meetings here in Edina were looking at data and seeing things we hadn't seen before, seeing needs we hadn't seen before, and sitting alongside teachers, rolling up our sleeves and saying, now what? How do we respond? And what I find so inspiring about this system of educators is it was never an if, but a how. How do we do this? And there were some tears, and there was some frustration, and there was some questions and wondering. But I'm going to share with you just some real key highlights. There's many things we could talk about, but some key highlights and some pretty outstanding results that came from that resiliency in our system. So with that, I also have to just pause and say I get to celebrate and honor the work that is many teachers, many educators that participated in what I get to speak to tonight. This is just the groups that I had the pleasure of facilitating, and I had over 50 educators that were not only in the resilience, embracing new realities and trying to learn new ways of being as teachers, but opting into leadership positions where we are saying that we are really committed to the growth and doing what's best in our new reality too. And so I'm not going to read all the names, but I just want to highlight our secondary ELA team who started meeting in December and met monthly to do the work that I'll speak of tonight. Same with our literacy leadership teams from our elementary schools, and then our MTSS assessment committee, which I'll speak a little bit to, and then Leanne and I will speak to later on in our next update here. But I just can't thank these team members enough for linking arms with us and teaching and learning and going through the processes and doing the work to make sure that we're doing the best work possible. So with that, we have 6 goals in our comprehensive literacy plan, and they are very wide-reaching. The comprehensive literacy plan encompasses a lot. And so when we marry this alongside of implementation science, which is just how we do business in our department of implementing change, we really wanted to start with some key pieces around Tier 1. And so you're going to hear a lot tonight around what we were working with in terms of Tier 1 supports, Tier 1 definitions, I should say, and then our Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. So specifically, again, I could highlight many things, but some things that I think are probably highlighted the most, or probably the most impact on the system, is that we have letters cohorts that are beginning. And so I'll speak more to letters in later on in the slideshow, but this is a professional learning experience that is deep and rich for our educators that are going to be building the capacity of our early K1 and 2 teachers for now, I'll speak to the timeline in a minute, in ways that we just haven't seen before with the current research. So I'm excited to talk about that in a little bit. We also have our district-wide committee that I spoke of in elementary. And again, what they have spent the year doing is engaging in countless hours under the guidance of our literacy coaches in researching current and enduring research around the 5 pillars of reading instruction. And from that, then, we were able to create a list of commitments that I'll share with you tonight that we'll be able to see commit to in all of our classrooms K-5 across the system. Our 612 Design Committee is deep in exploration right now in implementation science phases, and they've worked through a lot of research too around current and best practices, and I'll speak to that. They have developed their non-negotiables, and they're working towards developing some drafts for course proposals. Our assessment committee, which we'll speak to later tonight, but that began collaborative work to define again our tier 1, what are we committing to every student around screening assessments. And then finally, the instructional matches, and we've talked about that a few times, I think, this year with you all, around really using our assessments to identify the needs and be able to really target that instruction. I would say that's one of the biggest lessons that we've learned this year is just the power of that instructional match. I've heard it from so many teachers, and we see it in the data, and the literacy coaches would speak to it too. It's just that intentionality around really identifying what is the need and then filling that need versus what maybe we would have done in the past is just provide a comprehensive intervention, right? So that's been a really, really strong movement piece here. I'd say K-8 really worked on that this year, and I'll speak to that again later. So LETRS, is a professional development course. 36 hours for the first 2 units. It's a big undertaking. And what we see from educators across the country is that this is a game changer. And I'm just thrilled. I get goosebumps, in fact, when I think about the impact that this is going to have on our system with our teachers that are starting now. We have, at this point in time, we have 33 teachers that are currently enrolled and 6 additional teachers through an MDE cohort. So we have 39 teachers currently enrolled. And just this last week, we had 37 more staff members. 37 more staff members throughout the course of this summer, but they will begin their LETRS professional journey. And then starting in next year, we will have the remainder of our K-2 staff that will be involved in LETRS learning. And this is our K-2 classroom teachers, our ML teachers, special ed teachers, ADSIS and Title I teachers. So we're really ensuring that the entire system builds that capacity around the new research around how our brain learns how to read. And then moving forward, we will ensure that we have a plan, right? We have a plan moving forward for 3-5, but we really want to see and learn from our K-2 folks to see how this goes before we really solidify the plan. But third through 5th grade teachers can't be just left to this side, because what we know is, I know having a 3rd grader, they have needs too that have been because of disrupted learning, right, in the past 2 years. And so our literacy coaches have just really been amazing and have really built their capacity around that targeted match and helping those teachers through that collaborative process and data review. So they will be able to work alongside those teachers. The other thing I want to speak to that's not on this slide is the admin course. There are all the principals will be going through the admin course, which this summer is 10 hours, and then there's an additional 10 hours throughout maybe the next year. Jody and myself, Uli will be taking it as well, and our literacy coaches are already involved. So that, and what I like about that course that I just have just started this week is it is focused on leading the initiatives. And so while there is that research that's provided around the nuts and bolts of the reading and research, it's really that higher level of, if you're leading this, what do you need to know in terms of ensuring that this implementation lands where we need it to land, which is on the students. So with that, I think it's important to just pause for a minute and think this is a big undertaking. It's a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I will say before I go to this slide, the teachers are excited. I've said this to Jody many times since we hit send on the original email that was inviting teachers into the process, is I'm just blown away by the enthusiasm that the teachers have for this big undertaking. It's a lot of professional development, but they are ready, willing, and excited. The people who have already started are kind of champions of this also, saying how much they've already been able to benefit and how much they've already changed their instruction in the classroom and seen the impact. They're seeing the impact on their students. And so I'm more certain than ever that this just really is a key piece to us really providing that equitable instruction for all. It is a professional learning system. It's not a kit, it's not a resource. It's learning, it's like a college course, right? And we know that teachers matter more to student achievement than any other factor, right? And so we know that building into our teachers is really gonna give us the bang for our buck that we need. It changes the way that teachers teach reading. It changes the way that they see the resources that they have in front of them. Why are they doing what they're doing with this particular program? And it allows them to change the lives of the students that are in front of them. It's flexible, and so we have teachers that are teaching interventions that are saying, oh, this is super relevant. I really see that, I see how this aligns and supports my intervention. Teachers of core teaching, where they're teaching classroom grade level content, and they're also seeing the relevance. And so I think it just, again, is really comprehensive in that way. And so we're just really excited. We're really excited about what this can do for our system. So I had mentioned earlier also that we were, in our elementary work, we were really working to define that Tier 1 instruction. With implementation science, we know that we have to be able to have a clear definition of what we're trying to implement. And so when we started the year, we knew that we had differences from our buildings and how things were happening with literacy instruction. And the team came together and agreed that it was our task to really say, these are our commitments in our Tier 1 reading block. And so what we did was we spent 20+ hours researching best practice, current best practice around the science of reading. We then, April, I believe it was, sat and we took what we had learned. There was a tool from Reading League, which I believe I've shared with you in the past, but where it's an evaluation tool. It's a curriculum evaluation tool, and you put that side by side with your resources, and it will actually go through green flags and red flags. And what the team did was they sat down and they looked at being a reader, making meaning, right? Our two reading curriculum tools that we have. And they looked through the green flags and the red flags. And what they were able to identify is that by and large, the tools that we have in front of us meet all of the green flags, with the exception of a few pockets of places where now we can intentionally fill in. And so the team now is moving this forward with a list of commitments. So what you're looking at here, I know this is a lot, I just wanted to give you a snapshot so that you can see what all teachers, so this was shared out by our literacy leads. The teachers that are sitting on that committee doing the work shared this out in May. And what you'll see is that there's a time block on the left-hand side. This is, I should start at the top, right? This is what all students receive in Tier 1, okay? And so along the left-hand side, there's the time. And then you also have the pillar. So again, that was with the research, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, what pillar this addresses. And then the resource. So we have being a reader, making meaning. Sunday is also in this as well. This again is just a snippet of the top of K1. This exists for K1. There's a separate one for grade 2 and then one for 3-5 also. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the list of commitments. And this is where the team went through and identified key pieces that had to live in every classroom. So as we walk in, as administrators walk into a classroom or as coaches walk into a classroom, they can see observable evidence that what we are doing instructionally is aligned to that science of reading and the tools that they're using. And so, again, this is just a snippet of the very top portion. K1 might go front and back, right? Because there's just a lot going on there with what they have in front of them. But what I think really to celebrate this is it's across the district. So it's every kindergarten class. And what I really appreciate is that this is co-created with teachers. They were at the table making the decisions, making the recommendations. In fact, I asked them when I was facilitating the meeting, in the top and the commitments where there's about 8 or 9, I had asked them to choose 2 or 3. I said, let's just choose 2. These are what we have to see in our classrooms, the teachers said. And so they, again, are champions of the work. So I'll then pivot into secondary. So what we're ending the year with in elementary is we're ending with rich professional learning that has started. We are ending the year with a culmination of a lot of research that has landed on a list of non-negotiables in classrooms. And now when we look ahead to secondary, 612 has been meeting in a design team that we started meeting in December, so they have not been meeting as long. We are still probably in the middle of exploration phase, but we're following the process, and we've moved a lot of work forward. Some of the key pieces that they have been researching, a bulk of the focus in that first year, or in the first phase, is unpacking your current reality, and then understanding if this is where you are, we need to research where we should be. And so that was really the intent of this. So the culturally proficient school systems, the tools of cultural proficiency was a key piece. Multi-tiered systems of support, we know in the comprehensive literacy plan and the guiding change document, this is really important for us to ensure that we have that multi-tiered system of support. Guaranteed and viable curriculum, this is where we see the alignment, we see the vertical and horizontal alignment and the importance of all of that, students are really in that scope and sequence that makes sense for their learning, right? Equity and inclusion, curriculum design, and then just overall best practices. So from this, it was probably about 12 hours of research, about 2 meeting days, they came forward and created their course commitments through an affinity process. And you can see the overall headings that they identified, and then underneath each heading are all the key pieces that came forward from what they have determined non-negotiables. So it is this relevant writing, workload balance, alignment, again, that guaranteed and viable curriculum, authenticity, equitable responsiveness, relevant rating, language fundamentals, and then finally their culturally proficient school systems, and this just came off the rubric that we have for our curriculum and instruction. And so what the next steps will be then for this team, you'll see here the secondary timeline. And phases 1 and 2, I should also say, even the commitment of our teachers even goes into the summer, because last week we had about 20 teachers that came in to unpack standards, which is pretty impressive. So we are right in the middle of here, this phases 1 and 2, where we're reviewing our current research and then gathering input from stakeholders, and then unpacking standards is part of that first phase, phases 1 and 2. And so we have new standards in ELA that we're working with. We'll move forward next year into continuing to draft up course proposals that would then the goal is for them to be in the course catalog for next year to be implemented the following year. And then really in that phase, we're identifying what would the professional development be needed in order for us to ensure, again, those non-negotiables, that we're able to build the capacity within our educators to follow through on those pieces. And then we'll move forward to implementation, in initial implementation, and then full implementation is the final phase by 25-26. Lastly, our screening assessments. A huge success has been the MTSS Assessment Committee, which we'll speak to after this presentation. But this year, we had 5,368 students that were screened with Fastbridge. And we had 1,371 students who are progress monitored. Progress monitoring is when you basically take the temperature of your students, make sure that what we're doing is having the impact that we want it to have. And we had K-8 sites across the district in some capacity administrating that instructional match. We had specifically, I would say, the 2 biggest instructional match pieces were around phonemic awareness and phonics. Phonemic awareness was largely K-1. We found that to be a large gap, which when we look back at the disrupted learning of our early learners, it doesn't really surprise us a whole lot. And so there were some intentional interventions that were just short bursts where teachers were kind of call and response, kind of phonemic awareness pieces. And then fluency was another big piece. And so that really grades 3 through 8 focused on a lot of repeated reading with a partner, where what I also love about this is it sounds like, oh, this instructional match, and it's real intentional, and it's kind of, but the kids love it. They love to get with their buddies and sit side by side, and the teachers love doing it because the kids it's just enjoyable. They're with a buddy and they're reading a passage and they're seeing their growth and they're coaching one another, and it's just an enjoyable thing. So with those pieces, I'm going to share some of the results, and I'm focusing specifically on K-1 early reading for this piece of data. I listed along the left-hand side what's assessed in the spring. These are the foundational skills, and the reason why I'm highlighting this is because this has been the bulk of our work. The bulk of our work this year has been around really filling in the gaps of those foundational skills for our early learners. And so what I have here for you is the data from spring of 2021 to the spring of 2021 to the spring of 2022. So last year at this time, we were sitting at 58% proficiency, while this year at this time now compared to that is 66%. So we saw a growth of 8%. So overall, what we can say is that what we're doing is working for many kids. We're really moving the needle for a lot of our kids around those foundational skills. And so when teachers see this and see the impact of their work, it's really motivating. I also want to just note too that I had pulled some of the growth data and I didn't quite get it into the slideshow, so I apologize. But I think the growth data is really important too, because while this shows us what students tipped over the 50th percentile proficiency-wise, we also had a lot of students that just made incredible growth. And Fastbridge will compartmentalize the growth into 4 different compartments or categories, I should say. And we look at 2 categories that are putting them above the 40th percentile in growth. And so when we say these students are above the 40th percentile in growth, they're growing further and faster than their peers. Accelerated growth, we had 30% of our kids making accelerated growth in this area. We had 38% making typical growth. So overall, we had 68% of kids that were making typical or aggressive growth in this particular area. So that's really outstanding. The other piece that I wanted to highlight that again aligns with our work is the grades 4 through 8 take an auto reading assessment within the fast track assessments, and this again is the foundational skills. It's the word recognition, the decoding, encoding, morphology, synonyms, those key foundational pieces. It's a 6-minute assessment. It's timed. It's really brief, but it gives us a chance to really diagnose and see if kids are, even at the 8th grade level, are maybe missing some of these key pieces. And so what we saw overall this is from fall to spring because we did not do this last year. So from fall to spring, we had 77% from the fall up to 83%, which is a 6% gain overall in proficiency. And the growth in this, we had 48% of our kids making accelerated growth, which is above the 70th percentile in growth. Overall, we had 73% making typical or aggressive growth in this area. So again, just a lot to celebrate, a lot of hard work, and it's nice to see it landing where it needs to land. And I wanted to end with a quote by Elena Aguilar, whom I really appreciate her work. And it's moments of crisis drive action, but it's ongoing work that drives transformation. So this is just the beginning. So with that, I'll offer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Board members, questions or comments? Janie?
I'll go. First of all, thank you so much. I couldn't be more thrilled with the fact that this system is being created and implemented. It means the world to me as a board member and personally too. So I want to tell you that I'm grateful for it. I have 2 questions that are things that are I'm having a hard time kind of understanding how they will play out. So the first one is when I look at the students that will be getting screened in middle school. So next year with the data, I can't think of the assessment calendar that is coming later, we have our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders being screened, right? My question is, as those students are aging out of middle school and into high school, it appears that we're going to have a gap in some students having that continual screening. I know that that there's a recommendation for some students to continue screening at the high school. But my thought is it worth having a wider range of a lower threshold so that we are not missing kind of students that are on the cusp, right? Because I know it does take time to implement as we move up, but I also want to make sure we don't miss any students. And it kind of goes to my second point of when we get more data, which is what we want, because it's informing decisions and it's informing correct matches for our students, it's also going to mean that we have to have the capacity to intervene, which I'm concerned about having that capacity to intervene when there's a limited amount of time that needs are fighting for, especially at the high school, right? Like, we don't have as much time to intervene kind of at that next step above tier one. And so my ask would be that we're really creative in thinking about what this data means to what the daily life of a high school student might look like, right? Like, this is really important. This is so important. I want to make sure that it is, and I trust that you guys are going to do this, but I want to just say, I feel like I hope there's some creativity in creating more capacity and time and resources for what this data is going to probably show us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. In the assessment plan that we'll share after this presentation, we do have a plan to screen all ninth graders. So just that will continue up to ninth grade, and then the option to screen above that if needed. And so we have that option open. The other thing that I would say is that this has been a really key piece in the 612 design team, is when they are sitting around the table and starting to rethink what courses might look like or how we might service this. The phrase I think Dr. Stanley uses that just resonates so much with them is doors opened and students escorted through. And so they will actually say, how does this open a door and how does this help us escort them through? And so while I can't tell you exactly what that's going to look like now, I can tell you that it is absolutely a priority. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Karen?
I echo Janie. Thank you for this report, and I'm thrilled to see some of that early results because it is a big lift for our teachers, and I'm really happy to see that they're seeing the fruits of their labor in our students. A lot of the questions that I had you addressed, one of my interests was how our current curriculum was aligning with what they were learning. So I was happy to see that. I was really thrilled to hear you mention that we're having our principals go through, because I think as we try to really implement this, that site level leadership will be key in making sure that this is across the board. And the consistency across the sites and making sure that that happens. So I appreciate that. I think I just have a general question as like future updates as we get more of our teachers trained in letters and we start to really lift this off the ground. Is it reasonable to expect that we can, once a semester, get an update like this? What are early results showing? So if we know we're tracking well or if we need to pivot?
I would say we're happy to come and do an update and celebration at any time that you would like us to. It does seem that it would be reasonable to do it as you're indicating, and that it is fun because we really anticipate just great results, right? So to bring it forward and celebrate that with you, absolutely.
And as Bethany said, super excited and proud of them for all the work they're doing. And this is the tip of the iceberg. And so with the comprehensive literacy plan the way that it is, we have to continue to bring updates back to the board. And it seemed like it was a nice cadence this year for those updates and the cadence that they came. And so it makes sense that the cadence would remain the same, that we will in October bring a comprehensive data overview for the performance of students based on the new data metrics plan that the team developed. So I would envision the cadence being the same, especially as we move into the high school using the Fastbridge. Like it's rare that happens anywhere. I just want to say that is excellence that this team has brought to our high school that is rare that happens in high school. So I am very proud of them and the work that they've done.
And one more thing. I am really proud of our district for making this a priority and backing it up with the resources, the time. This is something our community has said they wanted. Our teachers are clearly saying, so I really want to, for all the people that have worked on this, we dove in. You dove in. And I appreciate that, and I hope that we just continue to keep that pedal down. And I don't know if we're allowed to do this, but as a board member, I would love to come and see this in action and see what does a screener look like? What are our teachers saying about this, if that's a possibility? Maybe that's an offline conversation.
Julie or Dan?
I just wanted to say thank you as well. I mean, I saw a lot of this in teaching and learning, but I think it's great and fantastic work that you've been doing. General question about the cadence and communication. You talked a lot about the cadence to the board. What's the cadence with the staff and teachers so that they can share in the celebration and in the learnings from all that you're finding?
That's a really good question. After each meeting, our teachers send an update of what they've accomplished at that meeting, so that that's going out to all teachers. So sent on behalf of, sent from the teachers that are participating in the work. So that's one form of communication that we have. And then just updating the principals on, so having one-on-ones with the principals to go through the data is what we've accomplished, what we've done this year. Sharing this out in the LLT, so the Literacy Leadership Team meeting, is where we've started this year. So we'll only continue, as now we have a more robust screening protocols where we have all students engaged in the screening. We can do even more of that communication out to teachers.
And Beth, can I just add one thing? I know that there have been those emails that you have sent out to just really acknowledge and give teachers a shout out. And so do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, just the individual. I mean, we've just seen, working alongside literacy coaches for me, so I meet with literacy coaches once a week. We meet for 2 to 3 hours on Wednesdays to just look at data, research, update practices, communication. And from that, I get to hear about so many of the amazing things that are happening with instructional matches. And so when those teachers come to a meeting, or if I see, because I do like to, I kind of will just spend a lot of time looking at the data. And when I see some really outstanding results from specific teachers, I will always just send them an email and say, I know what you've been doing, and look what it's done for kids. Sometimes I'll CC some people on those, so Dr. Stanley might see some of those, and Jody and Dr. Smalsel. But I think it's important. I think when you think about the work that you're putting in, I've always said as teachers, our biggest motivator is seeing that it's working. That's their biggest motive. That's our currency. That's our incentive. And so when we can just call that out, and we have some really modest, humble teachers, but I think it's important that we acknowledge that and we call that out and we say, you're doing great things. So I do try to take time out of my calendar to do that. It's important.
Hi, thanks, I echo everyone. Thanks for all this work. I have 2 questions. One is, on slide number 18, the data in there that shows the growth from fall to spring.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Slide 18.
Slide 18. I think it's slide 18.
Yep, right there.
So is that, I know there's no data to compare from last year, but from your knowledge, from like a national level or other schools that use this, is that typical? Is that low? Is that high? Is that something we would expect? Or, I mean, I'm not saying to look into a magic ball, but I'm just curious what that number means.
Typical is hard now. We kind of have a new reset, right? And so I was just spending some time with a data analyst in another district, really kind of mulling this over, because I was saying, and what we have to recognize is that we're in a new reality. And so to compare performance, and we don't have the trend data here, but even in her district, right? The trend data is really hard to compare. What I will say is when we set SMART goals, we usually set them for a 3% to 5% gain, mostly, right? I don't know, maybe you've given different direction on that, so I shouldn't. But we're above 5% on this, so I would say it's really impressive growth. And the national norming is what allows us to know that we are above that 50th percentile in the national norms. How that specifically compares to how other districts have done, I don't have that information.
Okay, that's helpful though. That's helpful for context.
We were talking about I smile because we were talking about this and the statistical significance of a data point, and that's where we were connecting the 3 to 5% and SMART goals, right? And trying to dig in with others that we know and who have more expertise in the statistics area around that conversation. So it is a good question. We do feel it's really good growth to celebrate, absolutely, and we'll continue to dig into that a little bit.
We'll be able to answer that better when we have another year
Yes,
and another
absolutely.
year and another year
Trend
under our
data.
belts. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure.
So I look forward to that too.
Okay.
But this, I mean, any growth is good growth considering what we.
Oh, no, it's great. I just was curious.
No,
I was
yeah.
like, was this, right, Right. So, and then the other question I had was, as you roll out more teachers, and obviously a lot more, how do you collect, other than anecdotally, and how the teachers are doing? Do you guys do a survey? Like, are teachers feeling overwhelmed by this? Even though if they see the growth and they know the benefit of it, I guess that's just a point of, what's the check-in with teacher process?
Yeah, that's really good. I would offer, having gone around, so after our fall data window, I spent a lot of time going around and meeting with teacher teams. And when I met with them, we looked at their class data, and then we looked at what Fastbridge would recommend in terms of instruction. So at elementary, I'll speak to just that for right now. They have a win time set aside, which is what I need time, which is designated for intervening. And the teachers were relieved to have something to teach. They knew what students needed, and they had a plan to do that, and they had a way to monitor its impact. And so from that, just like all of us, sometimes new things are hard. So there were some teachers that needed a little bit more support from the literacy coaches, and I have to tell you, they did an outstanding job supporting them in that way. Maybe they came in and helped progress monitor their students, or maybe they helped provide some of the materials for some teachers, or some teachers maybe didn't need that kind of support. But I would say by and large, teachers are grateful for the resources that come with that data. I would also say that much of this year, because it was new, was kind of an opt-in kind of a situation this year because it was so new. And so many teachers, the fire would catch on, right? Where maybe my colleague down the hallway was doing repeated reading with a partner and bringing their progress monitoring data to a PLC meeting, and all of a sudden now the whole team wants to participate. That's a specific example that happened at Concord, right? And so now moving forward, we've got nothing, I would say, so much positive energy around that for teachers, because teachers want to just respond to the data in a way that's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, and they've seen this. So it's not easy forever. Change is hard, right? We're changing what we're doing. But I would say this year in Edina, I haven't seen a lot of resistance or a lot of overwhelm around this particular thing. This was a hard year. There was a lot of stress just for everyone this year. But when it came to my work with teachers on this, it felt like it gave them a plan to follow that felt good, I think, for a lot of them.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I just had one quick question. When you went through the slide on the letters training, and you had mentioned making sure that it was effective before training the grade 3 to 5 teachers, one question I had, or just suggestion or wonderment, is if we have leading indicators that this is working, I would hate to see a group of students that are being successful in this go into a grade 3 class and have this scaffolding of letters training, and then go into grade 3 and 4 and 5 without letters trained teachers. And so I'm just suggesting that, especially for our most at-risk students, if it seems like this is working, potentially, as opposed to taking a complete break and then training everyone, maybe training certain teachers that we know will be teaching our most at-risk students, so there isn't that break in the continual exposure to the training. That was just one comment that I had.
And I wonder if maybe I misspoke in this. We will be training them. They are not, maybe I'll let you speak to that in the timeline a little bit.
Yeah, well, we absolutely will be providing some PD this year around literacy and some of the learning that will happen in letters for 3 through 5 teachers, so that they're not getting any of that letters foundational skills training. And we'll do that in bursts and in different ways. And then, again, our hope and our vision is that third grade teachers would start next year.
Okay.
And that we're working to also have some trained facilitators, right? So that we're just thinking through exactly how it will all come together. But we do know there is an urgency, and Erica, we need to pay attention to that pocket of kids, right? That are missing some of the K-1, 2 teachers' learning.
Yep.
They have disrupted phonics instruction.
Right,
Yes.
right,
The
that's
third
right.
and fourth,
Yeah.
Right,
Third
right. So maybe I
especially.
misspoke. It is more of watching the K2 and seeing what works in terms of the delivery and the structure that
Okay.
we've provided to see how that then
Okay.
would work.
Thank
So,
you for
yeah,
clarifying
Sorry
that.
about that.
No, no.
That's my fault.
Thank you. Great. Anything else? Well, thank you so much. This is outstanding work. Great. We are going to move on to our assessment plan, 2022-2023 assessment plan. And we have, again, Jody up here, and if you want to introduce your team.
Yes.
I believe it looks like we have,
Yes.
it looks like some people here and some people
I
not here,
know,
so I'll
and
let
I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna introduce the team and then,
Outstanding.
introduce, and then I'll move over to the side here, because
And
these
then
two
if-
are speaking more.
If I can ask the team to give us a very high-level presentation, just because we have a lot on our agenda tonight, that would be great. I appreciate it.
I know, I feel like I sit here, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'll introduce the team and get us started with the high-level presentation. Bethany, I introduced already as Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning, Bethany Van Asdel. I need to look at Leanne's title because it's really long, Leanne Feely, Student Support Services Continuous Improvement Specialist. And specifically in this role, MTSS Coordinator, and a lot of teaming and collaborating with teaching and learning with that MTSS role. And Deb Richards is our Gifted Education Coordinator. And so Greg Gusweiler is not able to be here tonight, so he is the one on the list that is not here, as he is traveling the country on a road trip right now. So I'm going to begin just going over high level of, oops, I think I went the wrong way. I'm going to just introduce this slide and then turn it over to Leanne. So the assessment calendar, really the background part of the executive summary, highlights that according to Minnesota State statute, it is the responsibility of school districts to have our assessment plan posted before the beginning of the school year. And Mr. Gusweiler has worked on this assessment plan that is up here. And in the difference in this and one in the past is that it is intended to be able to be responsive. So you'll see the category of dates, right, that's open. We want to make sure that it's really clear about who's doing what and when. And so we typically get together with our assessment coordinators in the buildings in the fall, leading up to the school year, and we determine the dates in the buildings. So again, the beauty of this is that it's more responsive, so that we're able to add those dates that are specific to buildings and not be, we'll still give broad windows, but that will be nice for parents to look at and see those detailed information in this plan, in this report. The rest of our presentation really highlights the universal screening component of the assessment calendar, because that is what we dug into as a team this year, and that's where I'll turn it over to Leanne and Bethany to highlight those components. And Deb is here to share a little bit about how we're going to move forward with a similar process next year in relation to talent development. So I can share places with you. I'm not talking again.
Yeah, so just as Jody mentioned, the proposed changes really have to do with the universal screening. You can see what's going to continue from last year, and then what the changes would be, the addition of that reading and math universal academic screening in K-8 3 times a year, and then moving to MAP utilized as more of a diagnostic for students who are at that exceeding level on FAST. So when we look at it, that's about that 86th percentile. And then moving into piloting the SABRS, My SABRS, which is the social emotional screening side of the Fastbridge suite. So piloting that in some places as we see how that fits well into, or how it fits into our system of data collection. And the way that we arrived at this proposal to add in screening is by having the universal screen, or the MTSS Assessment Committee, as Bethany talked about in the previous presentation. And we did just some shared understanding of what universal academic screening looks like. It's making sure that we are knowing that our Tier 1 is effective and know which students need additional support. Our team was rooted in implementation science and also rooted in, I just don't want to go. I think I'm pushing it. There we go. Okay, and also rooted in research and best practice, including both the MNMTSS framework that MDE put out this year, as well as the U of M carry work that a group of people went through in the 2020-2021 school year. And then we also did some collaboration and consult with St. Croix River Ed District, who really has a very strong MTSS system in place. Our team spanned the whole district from the ELC to the high school. And you can see our members there. As Bethany mentioned, it was a very successful year-long process. We started meeting in November, met through April, so about 12 hours total. A lot of the exploration phase, as she mentioned, with, grounding and where are we now and what research do we need to look at? And then determining kind of what are through the affinity process, determining what is important to us as we look at what current tools that we have, and determining what is the best tool moving forward for that universal screener. Oh gosh, okay, there we go. You can kind of see a snapshot of the rubric that we created, and so that did come together through that affinity process, and we used that to look at both FAST and MAP as well as Panorama, and then Sabres, My Sabres separately from the academic portion. The ratings did come out that the recommendation would be to use Fastbridge as our academic screener, which is highlighted here. There were other committee recommendations, so the first kind of pass at what the committee recommended based on what they had done through the rubric. Pre-K would continue with the TS Gold. That Fastbridge reading and math would be 3 times a year for all students K-8. Fastbridge reading and math would be 3 times a year for select students in grade 9. And just to highlight what that select is, all 9th grade students would get the fast reading in their English language arts classes. Students engaged in the Math Bridge intervention courses would also take the fast math, and those intervention courses are typically for 9th and 10th grade students. And then for any student in grades 10 through 12, there's a student support team at the high school, and if they make the recommendation that that student would need screening, then the student could engage in screening. And then, again, the Sabres, My Sabres, the committee recommended 3 times a year for all students in grades 2 through 9, and then moving away from Panorama. However, when we went to meet with the cabinet, then the kind of official team team consensus around what the endorsements would be. I really don't know why I can't get this to work. It worked for everyone else. There we go. It's probably Zach in the back doing it for me. The cabinet it's feeling bad. The cabinet endorsements then, the only 2 changes were that MAP, those are the highlighted ones, MAP would continue as that diagnostic for students in the exceeding, again, that 86 percentile on the FAST, and then we did add in MAP continuing for students engaged in our success programming, and that would be in the fall only, and that was on the request of the success program because they would like to have the fall to fall comparison data, and then they would move to using the FAST for their programming as well. The goal with that then is to gather correlational data between MAP and Fastbridge to see how that correlation exists on that exceeding high end of the scale. And then the other outcome that was a little bit different was to explore how Panorama and Sabres, My Sabres fit together so that we could have a comprehensive SEL data gathering. And then in the same way that we're going to be comparing the MAP and the Fastbridge, we will continue with Panorama and pilot Sabres, My Sabres in select areas and see how they fit together. There we go. Okay.
So we've talked a lot about Fastbridge this year with you all. Fastbridge is a comprehensive assessment system. There's a lot of different assessments that fall underneath that umbrella. It's currently used in over 200 school districts in Minnesota, and when we do our process, our implementation science process, we always look at comparable districts. So the 12 districts that we selected around us here in Edina that we would say are comparable districts, 100% of them are also using Fastbridge, and so it's widely used in the state of Minnesota. I don't need to go through the slide. It just is a really research-based and very actionable assessment system that includes everything from early reading, early math, all the way up to an adaptive measure that is very similar to MAP. We also really appreciate the fact that it can be used as a dyslexia screener in the sense that it can help us screen for markers of dyslexia. And how it does that is it really just tests those foundational skills that we would look at to see if there are any indicators. At times, sometimes, right, kids can score well on a Fastbridge and still have markers of dyslexia, so it's not the be-all, end-all, but it is a way for us to really look at initial screening data to see if there's a reason to dig deeper. One other thing that I wanted to point out was just the growth component of Fastbridge. So it's a little different than with MAP testing, and so what it does is it gives a percentile, growth percentile, and I spoke to that in the earlier presentation. And it categorizes that along a continuum of or categories around flat growth, modest growth, which is lower growth, right? And what I appreciate working alongside teachers with is to really look at, so what you're looking at here along the left-hand side would typically be the student name. So each row is a student score. And you'll see the fall score and the spring score, and then you see another row of color-coded rectangles with numbers in them, and that's the growth percentile. And the reason I took this snippet was to show that the value in this conversation and this information for teachers is that you can see a student who is in the dark pink, which is a high risk, a student scoring in high risk. And that student was also making, I can't read that, growth at the 13th percentile, so lower than most of their peers, right? And that's a student at high risk. But then if you look to the next row down, you'll see a student that started as benchmark and then slipped down a category to some risk. And I know that just because I know the color coding, right, that pink color. And they're also making low growth. The third student here is a high student who is benchmark, but still not growing as far or as fast as his or her peers. And so the value in that conversation for teachers really is, what am I doing? Or what are we doing or not doing, right? That we can service these kids in a better way, and that's at all levels. And then the right-hand side are students that are making high growth. So this is the flip side of that. And I love this look at it because you have a student up at the top who is not proficient, and I know that based on the color coding. So the high risk to some risk, right? They're still not benchmark, but they're growing at the 83rd percentile. So whatever is happening for that child is working in a way that's moving them further and faster than many of their peers. You can see the next step down is also a student who is benchmark, and again, I know that based on that color coding, making that good growth. And so it just allows us to look and see our impact in a different way.
And so when we look to next fall, we did design an implementation guide for teachers and school staff and principals that can be followed to help just identify the who, what, when, and how of each of these screenings for academics, for reading, and for math. And so this is in draft form, but can be used as we move into fall to help people understand what's being assessed. Thank you, and I think we can go to the next slide too. And that helps outline just what that family communication plan will look like as well. And so wanting to do some messaging out about after the approval of the screening plan, or hopeful approval of the screening plan, messaging out in August through 2 avenues, both through the buildings, kind of that, week's peak kind of thing, and then also through the district newsletter. We would then also look at having an informational meeting for community and staff in August. And then again, more messaging out at the end of August to families for kind of what is the what and the why of Fastbridge and Sabres as we prep students for the screening that's going to happen in that fall window. And then parent-teacher conferences would happen in November. That would be an opportunity for parents and teachers to talk about that fall screening results. Then holding also an informational meeting in November when parents would have those parent reports. We could offer 2 separate nights so that parents could learn more information and ask questions about what they are seeing there about their student. And then, again, parent-teacher conferences would take place in March, and again, that would be able to offer an opportunity for parents and teachers to talk about the fall and the winter screening data, as well as some of those growth pieces that Bethany just highlighted. And then I'll turn it over to Deb
All right.
for more next year work.
Yes, so in terms of talent development, when you think of an academic universal screener, you're really looking for those kids who might need some additional scaffolding to be proficient in grade level standards. But when you're thinking about a universal screener in terms of talent development, you're really looking at those kids who are really thinking at those high levels. And so you want to have a tool that is going to identify all students' talents, and you're also wanting to have a tool that will help us in terms of finding talent in kids that might not show up on a standardized assessment. So we're really wanting to kind of go through a similar process that the district assessment MTSS team went through, and we'd like to have like a smaller subgroup of that larger group, and to bring in some different vendors and look at what would be a really good universal screener. And I just want to be really clear that this isn't just to identify kids for a service. This is going to be a tool that will benefit all kids. It's going to be a tool that's used to make sure that we are helping kids to understand where their strengths are, and we're going to, as a system, continue to build on it for all students. So it's very much a part of a much broader picture. I think that's just a change in historically how some of the universal screeners have been used. It's sometimes been used strictly for identification, and we're going to broaden that. So, yeah, I'm excited about that work for next year.
So that is the end, and we can entertain questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I have
Julie?
one quick question. Yeah, thanks. That was really great. I have a question in terms of right now. I know, Deb, you were talking about the universal screener and looking at that next year, which is exciting to look at that and to expand that thinking. But it says in here that the MAP test would then be used right now to help identify talent development pathways. Can you explain, because it says 86%, so is it 86% of the Fastbridge results, or, and then they get selected to do the MAP test?
Yeah, so as you know, the MAP has been a really nice tool for us to use in terms of identification for services. And so our team really felt like we needed more time to really understand the FAST, and we really wanted to look kind of like the Success Center team wanted to really look at how we could utilize the Fastbridge. And so we had 2 second grade teams, one at Concord and one at Creek Valley this spring, who did the FAST and the MAP in math. And so we found a large number of kids in each of those in those grade levels that are exceeding standards. So like we need some time to determine like how then we can differentiate amongst all of those kids who are exceeding that standards. And so that's part of our plan next year, is to, again, in the fall, take those kids who are exceeding and provide that opportunity for them to take the MAP, and then for us to do that correlation. And Dr. Stanley has a great plan for us to do that.
That's great.
I also think in response to the question,
Yeah.
that even now, there isn't just one assessment that's being looked at, right? For
Right.
students to possibly be accessing talent development, because
Yes.
it needs, it's currently being very intentional, more of a portfolio approach, where there are many different data points. So just wanting to highlight that, even in the work next year, that we most likely, as Deb was trying to emphasize, we want to work towards something that will help all students identify their strengths, and that there's not just one data point that will help us with that, right?
I think that's great. I think it's just going to be important to communicate to families this shift in this thinking, because it is different, and especially if this is going to be a transition year next year, and what that looks like, because I know before it's been 2 tests. Sometimes you have you have to have 2 tests at a certain level to get in. Like, I just think, and I know you guys are going to be working on it next year, which is fantastic, but I think this next year is an important one, that we're just making sure we're communicating to all the families, so the expectations are set and clear as best as we can. So that's it. So, but thanks.
Agreed.
Anything else?
I just have one quick question or comment. Thank you for all of this information. I think it's an opportunity too, as we communicate out to families, to have they're going to have this information available, and how to read it and how to digest it and know that it's coming. So I really liked that family communication slide and how much thought has gone into that. As we look at, obviously this is an assessment plan, so it's everything in one peak. Just being really aware, as I know you probably are, I'd love to hear in a year from now what our classroom teachers are saying about this. Is it too much? Is it helpful? I know the Fastbridge, one of the nice things about it is it's quick, and it gives you a lot of information, and it's not as time consuming as maybe some assessments in the past have been. But I would love to just know how we're taking that temperature read from the people who are doing the work every day to say, yes, this was enough, or too much. And they might look different in second grade than it does in seventh grade. So just making sure that we're not expecting too much, or it's overlap. So, thanks.
Anything else? My only quick comment is, in your communication plan, I would lean into our cultural liaisons. It's very complex information to make sure that all of our stakeholders understand what this means and how it impacts their students. So, thank you. This is great work. We're going to move on to our STEAM programming. And I think half of you are staying up there. Jody, are you getting tired yet? And we're adding Dr. Smazel, Assistant Superintendent. Welcome. Welcome, everyone.
Good evening, Chair Ellenberg, Superintendent Stanley, board directors, community, staff, students. We're just here to give you a very quick and brief update on some of the work behind the scenes that we're doing around STEAM. And I am going to fly, so try to keep up. Basically, we had come to the board previously with a recommendation about advancing STEAM programming in the district. We're going to do a quick update on some action steps and then talk about some plans for 22-23. And so this slide just represents that recommendation we gave to the board about advancing STEAM programming in Edina. And so we've had a planning team that's been working behind the scenes, laying the foundation, researching other schools, doing an audit of what we're currently doing, and meeting to do some planning and designing, just trying to lay out the work. And so this slide kind of articulates some of what they've been working on. And one of the things that the planning team realized is that we do need to have a lot of teachers involved in this. And so we've built an elementary design team that will really focus around grade 3 through 5 teachers, elementary media specialists, and we need a lot of expertise around this. And we're building out a long runway. We're not racing. We're trying to be super thoughtful about how to do this so that we do it very, very well. And then the job of this, the charge of the design team is to really bring all the standards together in meaningful and engaging ways and address some of what is overwhelming in the elementary world, and that's trying to teach all of these standards, and especially with the new science and the new art standards, and trying to redesign the plate in the elementary world in a way that is thoughtful, meaningful, and engaging, again, to kids. So this spring, we audited some of our current efforts in Edina. We did some research around a number of other schools. I forget the number of schools that were contacted, but we've contacted a lot of different magnet programming schools. We have done some training around the new science standards with our 3 through 5 teachers. We've applied for a major competition, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. And we've launched our elementary design team. This fall, we're going to continue with a pre-K STEAM design team, a secondary STEAM design team, and then really draft that pre-K 12 STEAM vision for Edina Public Schools and what a marquee STEAM program looks like in the state of Minnesota. And we will begin to pilot some STEAM units at the early grade levels and really start going deeper into secondary pathways around STEAM. With that, I'm going to turn over to Jody to talk briefly about some of the highlights from our audit and our learning from our schools that we visited with.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Smazel. Jamie Hawkinson jumped into an audit for us, and so she spent some time looking at what we currently have within our system. And she has done amazing work, and it's also one to all of us acknowledge it's a starting point. So it's a good baseline. At the elementary, some of the highlights definitely are that we have a lot of resources, and there's not consistency in those resources and how they're being used across all of our sites. And so that was one key learning. One resource that I do want to highlight that was a consistent use across all of our 5th grade classrooms this year was Starbase Minnesota, and we jumped into getting some kits from Starbase, which is a very engineering by design, content, and curriculum area. And all of our 5th grade teachers jumped into that and are really excited about it and how it can also ground in some of the competition that Randy is going to talk about a little bit later. Our general science curriculum does, one thing that Jamie noted in the research that she was doing is that it's really standard driven, right? And yet it does not have the connections or the spiraling from grade level to grade level. So positive interactions and learning happening in each grade level, and a need to develop deeper connections across grade levels and that vertical alignment. Lots of amazing things happening in technology, both in the classrooms and intermedia centers. And we have some highlights in new arts standards that we're working on and some really exciting areas there that Deb has been leading. And then Math in Focus is our curriculum there, highlighting all the STEAM components. So then our middle school audit is highlighted here. Really, as Jamie would articulate, we start to get more in depth to specific STEAM activities when we hit the middle school, and then even greater when we hit the high school, and the number of courses that we offer and the number of electives throughout. So one highlight that I know you're all aware of, but is Project Lead the Way, is just an excellent resource that we've had working within our district for a long time. We continue to work with our middle school teams as well with the art standards and with our new art standards and how we're integrating some of the arts and some of the media content. So that is middle school, high school. Jamie has articulated here like the number of courses in each of the subject areas that hit the science, technology, and engineering, arts, and math. Those are all listed there. And then also noting the addition of AP classes in all of these areas. And then I think an added area that she's recently able to complete is just the number of opportunities in PSEO and the partnerships that we have there that kids are able to access. Science, there's an additional 49 course options that could be accessed through what we provide. So that's listed. And then the next slide, Deb is going to just highlight a little bit of the work that has been going on in the arts in connection with STEAM.
Yeah, and here you see some pictures, some art created at Countryside Elementary, and I want to just really give out a shout out to our media specialists as well as our visual arts teachers, because they really have a sense of wanting to collaborate with the classroom teachers, and this is evidence of that, is that this visual arts teachers took some of the science standards, social studies standards that they are working on and integrated it into her classroom, so.
Great. And the partnerships just like are exciting, as Dr. Smuzzle noted. The integration of the content area is a huge founding point of STEAM. And another component here that I'm going to just highlight is we had another Jamie Johansson, teacher at Highlands, do some work and digging into what's happening for STEAM in other districts, and it was over like 50 schools that he called and reached out to. Now, he didn't talk to every single one of those schools, but he really dug deep and gathered a lot of information about some really amazing work that's going on, and also really heard from a lot of the districts and people that he talked to that we're excited to partner with you. So as yes, we grow and share information with you, we're excited to see what you do in Edina and partner together in order to have great outcomes for students around STEAM. I do, one of the schools that he pointed out was Watana School District is really having strong programming, and Kara Reichenberg has actually worked really closely with that district. So fun to see those connections and see the opportunity that can come from what we're learning from other districts.
In addition to the learning, we received email communication forward from Dr. Stanley about a great opportunity for our school district, and it's called the Student Spaceflight Experiment Program. So imagine our Edina students designing experiments that get conducted in space and get selected to go up to the International Space Station. Like, what an amazing opportunity. Surely a pivot point for kids in life that are thinking about what do they want to do with their lives, whether they want to be an artist, an engineer, a designer, a material scientist, or go into research, or be a writer. All of those are going to be opportunities that are incorporated into this. So Edina is only the second school district to ever do it. We're the only school district in Minnesota doing it this year. So we will be representing Minnesota on Mission 17 on a rocket that will be launched next summer, and Edina students will have their research being conducted on the International Space Station. It truly is a remarkable opportunity. We are so excited to partner with Ed Fund, who is helping us provide this opportunity for our students. This is open to any students in grades 5 through 12, but in workshop week, we're going to be training a set of core teachers across the district on how to do this with students. And this is authentic STEAM work. This is marquee programming, and it's a great start, and we are really excited to be able to launch this. What a blast this will be. Sorry for the pun. We do have a new Edina STEAM website, and we are highlighting this opportunity on that STEAM website. So a shout out to the communications team that put together an incredible site laying out this opportunity to communicate it to families. And part of what we want to do here this evening is articulate what we've been doing behind the scenes, but also what's coming up, and get the word out that this is a great opportunity for our kids. We also put a link to the National Center for Earth and Space Science Education, and they're the ones hosting this because we are on the precipice of commercial space travel, and they're looking for young people that want to go into careers and advance that in our society. And what a fantastic opportunity for them to explore that. In addition to some of the work around elementary, we're really going to continue to dig in at the secondary level. And so we are talking to Stanford D School to do some facilitated work with our school district to really look at and help us map and refine their secondary course offerings around STEAM. Any opportunities to integrate those content areas into courses to increase clubs, micro-credentials, certifications, internship opportunities, create partnerships with our community. We've done some work on soliciting some community businesses through our Business Roundtable event, and we have a lot of partners that are ready to go, and now we have to build this thing. And we know that we do have some offerings sometimes that don't run because we have low enrollment, and we need to address that. You know, if we're going to be a marquee STEAM program, we have to invest in the resources to be able to offer these opportunities. So we do need to look at some things like that. Continue to build some strategic partners, and again, super excited about where that's headed. We want to measure our progress as we go, and this will be part of the STEAM design teams, is to add the details of the how and when. But generally, we want to make sure that we're completing our tasks around our project on time, that our families are aware and are understanding of the opportunities, and that we have feedback loops for our families to help us in that design. And we have lots of partnership and broad stakeholder input and feedback around the designs. That we have regular public discussion and dialogue with our board to make sure that we are soliciting that feedback element and be able to hold those public discussions and share about the progress and the direction that we're headed. And then most importantly, that our students are learning at deep, robust levels, and that they are meeting academic benchmarks in science, tech, engineering, arts, and math across the district. Teaching science, as an example, at the elementary world is always challenging because of the focus around the core literacies, and when they're viewed as siloed subjects, it's really hard to find time to fit them in. So we have to think differently. We have to take the same puzzle pieces and put them together in a different way that helps with the plate and makes it more realistic and yet more engaging. And again, that's what the design team work will be, and a long runway for doing this. Satisfaction and engagement rating. So it's really about the learning and the learning environment. And those are the things that we want to monitor and measure as we go. So with that, we are going to pause and see what questions, or I'll turn it back to Erica, I guess, to see how you want to handle the next step.
I will turn it over to the board for questions or comments.
I just have one. Thank you for this report. It's really exciting. If you haven't already, on your design team for both elementary, middle, and high school, make sure that we have some special ed teachers on there. This is the kind of stuff that for kids with special needs where they haven't been able to shine maybe in some academic areas, this is where their light turns on. So, you know, we were just talking about reading. thinking about even some of those dyslexic kids and making sure we have some reading specialists in there to say, how do we make this accessible? So really exciting stuff. Thank you.
Julie?
Yeah, thanks. I saw in here, this is awesome, by the way, and I am so excited about the space element. So that's just super, super exciting. My one question is, in here, it talked about the key being staff input and staff buy-in.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about how you're bringing teachers in and what the plan is?
Yeah, so I'll use the elementary design team as an example. So we've recruited a classroom teacher from each level in grades 3 through 5, media specialists, art teachers. We'll be recruiting a music teacher. We will have some students that are participating on it as well. And then we do need that team to really look at who else needs to be here. The design team will be teachers who are doing the work, and they will be designing it for teachers who will be doing the work. The facilitation of the elementary design team will be Dr. Anne Marie Thomas from the University of St. Thomas. She is world-renowned. She is an amazing STEAM leader in the country, and she is local. And she's wanting to work with us and super excited about it. So again, the people designing the work will be teachers. Again, a long runway, doing this really well, starting with grades 3, 4, and 5 at the elementary level for 3 years, and then working back to grades K1, 2. So we're not rushing this. We're trying to learn from our resources, involve the stakeholders, be able to have feedback loops, and really design it in a way that makes teachers want to do this because it adjusts the way they're trying to manage their plate.
We're also trying to partner. You might be seeing a theme here where we're partnering K2, strong focus on literacy, while 3, 5 starts on the science and the STEAM, so that we're recognizing the capacity of our teachers, right, and building in ways that it will all come together eventually, but that we're not doing too much at once. So just that partnership that's happening and the intentionality behind the design teams and the PD.
That's great. This work has been great over this last year in that runway, and kind of the research that has gone in and the planning. So I really appreciate this presentation and this update. So thanks.
JD or Dan?
Sure. I'll say, so one thing I wanted to comment, I was just recently in a meeting for work and heard a new number thrown out there. I can't remember the exact number, but the tens of thousands of aviation experts, not just pilots, but actually aviation team members in commercial and in private is mind-boggling. So knowing that we are growing kids from the bottom up it's going to be great. It's great opportunities for them. And I did thank you for commenting about, I have a concern where we do have classes at the high school that are not running because of low enrollment. And when I hear all of the talk about everything that we're doing, the classes that we've approved recently for middle school and stuff, just kind of feeling as if we're building this amazing aircraft, but there are opportunities where we can maintain that runway a little bit better. Feels like it's really important so that the longevity and the sustainability of our programs and the attractiveness of families or students remains. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So thank you.
First of all, thank you. This is great work. I think it's exciting work. My kids did not like my idea for the space project, but it was seen at Epcot in the 80s that I suggested, so that's why.
Was it for dogs?
No, it was anti-gravity plant seeds, and they thought that was lame. So, but thank you. My, I guess, question or comment is I would love to see like a shared vision statement for this entire project. Like, what are we driving? I love the first slide about why are we doing this, but what are we driving towards? Is it do we want all our students to have an advanced STEAM experience? Is it a programming? We want to have enhanced curriculum? Is it we want to have an elementary magnet school end this? I think for me, that's a little opaque right now. And I would love to have, whether it's a bullet points or a couple of statements, that every single time this is in front of us as a board or your groups that get together or the community, we all have common understanding of this is what we're reaching for. And at the end of this process, this is what our students are going to get and our community is going to get. And a lot of it's sort of interwoven in these slides, but I think it'd be great just to pull that out and really be crystal clear about this is our vision for this. So that's my only comment, but it's really exciting, so thank you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that will be great to be able to just be super crisp and why we're doing this, what it's about, what the outcome is, and be able to have that in a talking point.
And it's sort of like a grounding document, so there might be times we have to prioritize things, and it's like, well, let's look at our vision. Which of these gets us closer to our vision? Which is this, this, and this. So, great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Julie Green for our policy discussion. No problem. Absolutely. I can talk about my space experiment again.
Okay, here we go. So we have 3 policies for discussion tonight. Policy 603, policy 618, and policy 620. We're going to first talk about policy 603. Jody D. St. Hubert is here. She's going to walk us through the changes that were made to the policy, and we'll open it up for questions. And just as a reminder to the community, all these policies do go through the policy committee. We work with the administration on statute changes and other changes that are recommended. So go ahead.
Okay, so 603 really starts on 329 of the board report. So I'm going to wheel back to that while I also just highlight the changes that were made within the policy. Primarily, changes are really edits that to align with like current language around certain committees, edits around just some of our grammar and some of the words. Then also specifically, M and N were both added. I think it's in section 4 in order to make sure that we're aligning with state statute. So you'll see those 2 components, and then the appendix. The old appendix was taken out and the new one was put in. And so that new appendix really just reflects the work that our teaching and learning team has done this year around curriculum review and process. And that is probably the biggest update within there. Are there other questions that I can answer?
Questions from anyone? Nope.
Okay. I think we are good then to move on to the next 2. The next 2 that we're going to look at together because the conversation and the reason that they were brought to the policy committee, there's impact on both. So go ahead.
Okay, excellent. So the next 2 are 618 and 620. 618 is grading, and 620 is course credit for learning. And as Director Green noted, that they're brought together in order to ensure that we have clarity on what is and what is not weighted on transcripts is the main component of conversation in those 2 policies. The overall commonality is that courses that are taught by Edina teachers under district direction can be evaluated, and that ensures consistency, and thus those are the classes that are weighted. Those that are not taught by Edina teachers are not weighted because there would be too much inconsistency. However, it's really important to note that they're on transcripts and that our colleges recognize those on transcripts as college courses, even though they're not weighted within the GPA. So those pieces are in both of those assessments. There's a little bit of wording in each. 618 there's Appendix 1, C1A, and C2 give a little bit more wording with specific clarity around the weighting at a more detailed level that I just highlighted. And then in 620, that one, there is in section 8, there was really just words that were crossed out, where it's crossed out that the grades will be weighted. So that aligns with 618.
Questions from anyone?
Does anyone have a question? Oh. No? Okay, great. So policy 603, 618, and 620 will come back for action next month. Thank you so much. Director D. St. Hubert.
Okay, we're going to move on to our action items. Do I have a motion to approve the 2022-2023 adopted budget description?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Outstanding. So we have Margot Bach, our interim director of business services, who is going to join us via video, but unfortunately her power is out, so she is on the phone. And then I believe we have someone in-house that's going to advance this. Oh, you're there, Margot. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Welcome. It's nice to see your face.
Well, it's good to be seen, I can tell you that.
Thank you for coming and presenting to us tonight.
Yeah, it's been an interesting evening while you've been having the rest of your presentations. So Zach behind the scenes, I have to thank him because he's helping me out here.
Great. Thank you, Zach.
So, did you have more or do you want me to get started?
You're welcome to get started.
Okay, all right. Well, good evening, Chair Allenberg and Superintendent Stanley and the rest of the board. We are, tonight, we're going to talk about the 22-23 budget, and it's been a process for about the last 6 months. If you go to the next slide, you can see just kind of, just a summary of the things that you as a district have gone through to prepare for the budget. A good trail was in place for me to be able to start and pick up from the last couple of months to help out here and complete the budget to meet your June 30th deadline with the state. I just want to thank the board and the Finance and Facilities Committee. Again, Zach tonight's helping me out a lot, and Rachath, the controller, Dr. Stanley, and it's really a culmination of all staff and the community coming together to develop this budget. So we'll quickly go through some of the budget highlights and then answering your questions that you have, and touch just upon the long-range plan as well. So your budget document starts on page 357. And it's broken into 4 different sections. If you want just the high-level overview, go to the introductory section. Then we have a section on the organization and strategic roadmap. Then if you kind of want a mid-level financial summary, go to that financial section. It gives summaries and histories about all the funds. And then if you want to even dive a little bit deeper into some financial detail, go to the informational section. As far as the parameters, this would be the next slide. And the assumptions for within the budget, you as a board approved, and it should, I did not correct this or catch this, but it should say March of 2022 board approved budget plan with revenue and expenditure parameters and a variety of assumptions that John Tope presented to you and you as a board approved. I use that as my guiding tool to then pick up the budget, and then what has remained the same, what new information do we have between March and now, and developing this final budget for you. Enrollment, I took a look at that, and it's really very, very close, almost exactly the same as what was presented to you in March. As in Edina, we're typically stable. Sometimes we go down a little, sometimes we go up a little. You can see on this chart, which is actually the average daily membership for K-12. Sometimes we use the terms enrollment and average daily membership interchangeably, but the good news is projections are stable and maybe with a slight, small increase out into the future. All depends a lot on the kindergarten enrollment, and also I know we've had an interesting few years here, and you know, as we're back full-time, having families and students back and adding in programming back, then does that also bring students back or open enrollment, those kinds of things. So I think it'll be important in the fall to, once school starts, to really take a look at where that enrollment is, then what is the average daily membership projection. Other assumptions are still remaining very similar to what was projected in March. I will say on the revenue side, one area that did go up a little bit is the interest revenue. The district financial consultants updated, and when interest rates go up on borrowing, they also go up a little bit on investing. So that's helping us a little bit in all our funds, to include the general fund. And I did update some more for utility and fuel costs. Unfortunately, they increased a little bit more. And then I will touch on the assigned fund balance for the separation and retirement benefits a little bit more in the later in the presentation. We had 25 plus retirees this year. We averaged typically around 11 or so. That in your March budget plan, John had adjusted for the cost of that in 2021-22. It has a longer term impact, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. Zach, if you want to move to the first pie chart, our revenue is broken down into 4 different areas, the majority coming from the state. We do have a supportive community, so we do have also the second largest portion is property taxes. The key point here, I would like to point out that a 1% increase in the general ed formula when the legislature is in session, and they talk about a 1% increase on the formula for Edina, that's $640,000. If you can go to the next slide, then on our expenditures, we're providing services to students, so one would expect that the majority of our budget is in salaries and benefits to provide those services. And just as another little note, 1% increase on salary and benefits is $1.1 million. So that becomes an annual budget challenge, not just for Edina, but for all districts, when 1% on the formula from a dollar standpoint does not equal 1% increase in expenditures. So if we move on to the summary of all governmental funds, which is on page 18 of the budget book or page 376 of your board document. This page provides a breakdown of revenue and expenditures along the left-hand side, and then your funds across the top. And your special revenue funds is your food service and your community service combined together. And then it gives a summary of your revenues, expenditures, any other financing sources, and then the gray shaded area are your beginning fund balances and your ending fund balances. Now keep in mind, the beginning fund balance would be July 1st of 2022. So we're still estimating what those beginning fund balances will be, because we have the audit to go through this summer to find out what the actual fund balances will be. And then the ending fund balances is as of June 30th of 2023. Major changes or changes in revenue were the 2.45% increase in the general ed formula from the previous year, and then federal programs, some of the CARES funding or the special grants that have been available the last couple of years. We're anticipating a decrease in that, and some small levy increases. And then on the expenditure sides, we have aside, we have elections every other year, so we don't have that in 22, 23. Federal costs associated with receiving federal funds also go down if we aren't receiving the revenue, and then some costs associated with increased severance costs. In the middle section, you will see one line I want to point out for sure is other financing sources. We're planning ahead for the Concord and Countryside editions that you had as a board discussion in February. Through lease levy, that process is in place for those. The borrowing will actually be next spring, so this is an estimate of what that will be. And then once we know the actual number, we'll update that. If you look at the bottom of the fund balance area, you can see the changes. All funds are in a good financial position. There are some changes up and down. So the general fund unassigned, undesignated is 7.1%. Our minimum by board policy is 6%. We'll discuss this a little bit later in the presentation because what really is key is to look at the long-range plan to see what then 23, 24 and beyond looks like with this information in the general fund. The next chart then shows the same information. It's page 17 of the budget report, page 374 of your board document. It shows the same information for the general fund as the previous page. It's just sorted in a different way. So your estimated beginning fund balance is at the top with your revenues, expenses, and transfers, and your estimated ending fund balance for June 30th, 2023. And your various types of fund balances along the left-hand side. Why I like this one is it does show some deep details in those types of fund balances versus a previous page summarizes them, but it shows less detail on revenues and expenditures. So I think both pages are really useful for different reasons. Two things I want to point out here, I won't go line by line, of course, because I'm also not sure how long my hotspot will last. The assigned for separation and retirement benefits is about 2/3 of the way down. You see under transfers, $750,000 there, and transferring money into that. We are required to reserve 2 years worth of anticipated or actual, some of them we actually know, and then projected severance payments. When we have a higher than average number of retirees, whether they're teachers or other staff members, that impacts that long-term severance that we need to set aside. I've done an estimate that too should be looked at after the audit and fine tune that a little bit, but I did spend a little bit of time on it, and I think we do need to put some money in there to set aside, and knowing that it needs to be looked at again after the audit and updated accordingly. And then the other piece is part of your March approved budget plan. The assigned fund balance for literacy and virtual programming was to be used as part of your budget plan. And so you can see that there's some drawing down of those funds. In addition, you don't see it in the fund balance. Your March plan also is using $2 million of some of the federal COVID relief funds because they'll carry over into 22, 23. So then the next slide shows in the orange column is 22, 23, and it's the long-range plan. So you have 21, 22 as the base year or history year, and keep in mind that's still budget, that's not audited. 22, 23, this is the budget I'm presenting to you tonight, and then projected forward. And this is where you see the 7.1% fund balance for the unassigned fund balance. We do need to pay attention to 23, 24 because, as I stated, we are using one-time funds in 22-23 of $2 million, carrying over of the federal funds, and 1.2 million in the assignment for virtual learning, that we are using $3.2 million of one-time funds that are not available in 23-24 and beyond. So it's just something now in the spring we need to be aware of. I think as the fall, the audit will come in, what is enrollment doing in September, and just taking a look at our overall budget and seeing what these projections, this long-range projection looks like after the start of the school year. The other thing unknown, because of so many retirees, we are making an assumption of where new hires will come in at. And so in the fall, when budgeting is done again, we know who has been hired and where they have been hired on the pay scale and that kind of thing. So we'll just have more information at that time.
I'm sorry. This is Stacy. Margot, can you tell us which page of the budget packet that chart is on?
That one isn't in the budget document, but I certainly can provide it separately so that the board can have it. Yeah, the next few slides are not in the budget document. I only put the 22-23 budget information in the budget document.
You can keep going, thank you.
Okay. Then the next slide is just a graphic visual of what we just talked about on the previous slide. Sometimes I think the graphic just sends the best. I'm a numbers person. I like the numbers chart, but the graph certainly tells the story. And then the next chart is a comparison with our history and fund balance and with some other districts. And go to the next chart. So what can we do as we look into 23 and 24 and beyond? Like I said, complete the audit, always monitor legislative session, look at enrollment, look at other funding sources. We're at the cap on the referendum, and then look at budget adjustments. So with that, I would open it up to any questions that you have. Dr. Stanley, did you have anything in addition? I know we talked about a number of items. Did I miss anything? Anything you'd like to add?
I wouldn't say I'd like to add it. We certainly went over this information at the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. I don't know if Dan has anything that you would add. I know that Michael was there, and so I don't know if there's anything else that folks who, Michael's not here, but would add through that lens.
Before Dan goes, I touched base with Michael, and he said he had nothing to add, that nothing that Margot wouldn't provide. So I just wanted to let you guys know that I touched base with him. And I'll turn it over to you, Dan.
Yeah, and I was unable to attend last Monday, so I was not there.
Do board members have questions for Margot or Dr. Stanley about the budget?
No, I don't have any questions. I was just going to say, Margot, I have always thought that your presentations have been really thorough, so it's really exciting to have you back and presenting this to us in a way that it's easy to follow. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
I was going to echo that. Margot, you have a way of making graphs like no one else that I know. So it's sure great. This is Karen Gabler. It's sure great to see you again. Thanks for stepping in.
I had one question, Margot. Given the high rate of inflation and the high cost of gasoline, have those increased costs been accounted for in the budget and long-range planning? Is there a pad for like transportation, gas costs, and energy costs?
So Eric Hamilton on the utility side of gas and fuel, electricity, part of your March plan included increasing for utilities. Then then more new information came out in May, and so I increased it even more. And I also looked at, for transportation, the diesel fuel, and bumped that up. Keep in mind, I was doing this even before the last 2 or 3 weeks where it's really been going up. So there is an inflationary increase in the long-range plan ongoing, so a certain percentage, it's we usually put in 3 to 5%, but lately it's going up, much more than that. So that should be something that we look at in the fall when it's updated again. My hesitation with saying, okay, it's going to go up 15% each year, eventually it'll stabilize itself. So do we put it higher for 23, 24, let's say, and then lower it back down, maybe to 5% after that? Those are all conversations that could be had.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure you felt we had adequately accounted for the inflation as it is now for a budget for next year. So,
Yeah, with the
I mean, as much as you
information
can.
we had in May, yes, yes,
Yeah.
but it continues to go up.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All those in favor of approving the 2022-2023 adopted budget, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The budget is approved. Do I have a motion to approve the Independent School District 273 Long-Term Facility 10-Year Expenditure Plan?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we'll turn it back to you, Margot.
Okay, so the 10-year plan started facility plan started in 2013, and then the goal was to address our deferred maintenance and our mechanical systems and boilers and HVAC systems and a variety of things were well beyond their useful maintenance life. And so that plan has been in place for many years. You're aware of it as you've been in the buildings, and there's construction in certain buildings, and we rotated around. In 2015, MDE had passed the requirement, or the legislature did, and MDE implements it, the 10-year plan long-term facility maintenance process. Part of that process is annually we have to have a 10-year facility plan and send it into the state. And then, so that's your first agenda item tonight. And then the second one is a 10-year budget that includes how we're going to fund that plan. So right now, this particular agenda item is the 10-year expenditure plan, and I would recommend approval and answer any questions that you have.
Questions from board members? Okay, all those in favor of approving the long-term facility 10-year expenditure plan, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The 10-year expenditure plan is approved. Do I have a motion to approve the long-term facility maintenance program budget application?
So moved. Second.
Back to you, Margot.
So then this agenda item takes into consideration the 10-year plan you just approved and funding sources from bond and our annual levy. The requirement is that this needs to be approved so that the levy certification process includes long-term facility maintenance in the information you receive in September for the overall district levy certification. Part of our 10-year facility maintenance plan then is local levy, annual levy, and then bond. As working with the district financial consultants at Ellers, they take into consideration not just this plan for bonding, but where the district is at with all their debt. And so this plan, along with Countryside and Concord additions coming on to the debt rolls, they have structured this plan to have the tax rate go down just slightly. And what we like to see that versus having the tax rate go up. So I would answer any questions you have and recommend approval.
Questions from board members? Okay, all those in favor of approving the long-term facility maintenance program budget application, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The long-term facility maintenance program budget application is approved. Thank you so much, Margot.
Thank you.
Hopefully you get your power back.
Yeah, I hope so. Murphy's Law, my first virtual board meeting when power goes out.
Yep, that's how it works, I think. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the food service management contract and meal price?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Outstanding. Dr. Stanley, would you like to introduce this topic?
I would. So, Chair Ellenberg, Board Directors, actually, I'm going to just invite up to the table in case you have questions, Ryan Kleingen. And Ryan is from Catalyst, which is our sourcing agency that helps to run our request for a bid. And so Ryan has been involved in throughout this process. And then I may call up Val if necessary, because Val was involved in this process as well. As a matter of fact, Val, can you come up and talk about the survey that we started with when we started this process? So in compliance with federal and state government requirements, the district conducted a request for proposal to determine if we would continue with our current food service vendor or if we would look into other food service vendors. And that process was extensive, went over for a couple of months, really truly had oversight of that by our former business services director, John Tope, and of course, Val was involved as a cabinet member, and then, like I said, Ryan was involved in the process as well. So Val, do you want to talk about just about the family engagement side of it?
Sure. Good evening, members of the board and community and fellow directors. Ironically, I was just opening that up in my email as I was kind of looking through things. So we worked with Greg Gusweiler and Mary and John Tope to put together a survey for all families in Edina. We were looking for 6 categories, asking them about variety of food choices, overall quality of food, the price of the meal, dietary considerations, portion sizes, and ethnic food selections. We learned a lot from putting the survey together. Would probably maybe frame it up a little bit more comprehensively, but we were working on a pretty short timeline, and we felt we received over 1,000 households responded. We gave time and space for families to put in comments, and we received a lot of comments, which was good and helpful. We categorized those comments, and really a few things floated to the top that I don't have in front of me right this minute, but overall, it was comments about price was not one of the primary ones. Variety of food choices and overall quality of food were actually the number 1 and 2. But I have those materials back in my office. So it was good feedback, and feedback we brought back to the next portion of our input stage.
Thank you for that. So then, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. And if you just want to give an overview of just the overall RFP process, that would be great. And then, board members, if you could move to page 440 in your board packet, this provides visual representation of what Ryan will share.
Good evening. Basically, the process through MDE is that every 5 years, it is required that a district who uses what they call vended service management, which is, think of it just complete outsource of our food service operation, is required to take it out into either a bid or an RFP. There are generally 2 kinds of these agreements. Historically, the district has used what they call a fixed price agreement, Where these are advantageous to the district has always been, it gives a kind of a clear line for budgeting purposes. The other agreement type is what they call cost reimbursable. What this allows is, if you want to say more collaboration or wiggle room within the contract. A fixed price basically results in the company or the vendor having to stay right within that realms. What we started to find is we put out an RFP for both these types because some of the survey feedback suggests that parents were concerned with things like food quality. Well, as everyone knows, we saw kind of a significant, I don't know if hyper is the fair term, but inflation rate, and which resulted in our food partner company kind of struggling to kind of keep it in bounds, so to speak, from a profitability standpoint. They were very good partners during this, but they did do everything in their power to stay within the kind of the controls of the contract they had agreed upon. So going into it, we did certainly look at both of these options and conducted RFPs for both of them, taking into account everything from operational, reputation. There was a taste test. We went out and worked with the PTO committee, allowing them to provide some feedback and even providing them a weighed vote in the overall evaluation. We shifted a little bit in the evaluation versus the last time in that we allowed, instead of having kind of 1 point for this, yes or no, 1 point for that, yes or no, we had a little bit more flex so that both the administration as well as the PTO evaluators could kind of move a little bit, and it wasn't also all or nothing on every little point. Ultimately, a lot of this process is defined by the MDE, and so a lot of it's almost like a paint by numbers type of approach. The variation that we did in this round is that we actually did it twice because that's what MDE required for us to be able to see what both contracts would do. Ultimately, what we found is that the district's in a position in which we can shift to more of a relationship in a contract in which our PTO partners could be more collaborative with our food services. We have the opportunity to look at hey, do we want to invest additional dollars? Without specifics, I know John had advised us several times along the way that we were at a pretty healthy budget fund in what we were doing. Some of that was a byproduct of very aggressive contracts in the past. When a lot of other people were paying more for food, we had our fixed price. So one of those things that kind of worked out, but probably not what we wanted to work out in that time around. Ultimately, yes, all of these things were evaluated. They were run through multiple evaluators who reviewed both summary notes as well as all these RFP updates, and they were and all these scores were sent in and compiled. Pricing was all just pricing scores were all level across the board so that there wouldn't be an inconsistency. And so the real evaluation comes in everything from the programs, the menu planning, the sourcing of the product. Ultimately, within this process, it came back to that the best step forward is to maintain the consistency of our current provider, but shift that contract type over. Encouraging that provider and setting new expectations for an additional level of collaboration with the PTO committee so that we can kind of hit this head on and really give them more of a voice. And we've empowered, one part I could say we empowered, the other part I could say we took away the alibi from our own, our contractor to be able to say, okay, we now have the ability in this contract to make that adjustment so that they're not taking all the risk as they listen to the parents and try and drive a better food services product and experience for our students and families.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Ray. And some of the areas that families are excited about to move to a cost reimbursable from a fixed but remaining with Chartwell's is that our students will now have access to fresh fruit every day. In fixed, in a fixed rate contract, and especially during COVID, with all of the many additional expenses that came on, it was hard for, as Ryan said, for Chartwell's to stay within those budgetary parameters and remain, not break even, quite honestly, for them where they were at. As Ryan mentioned, we had a group of 8 PTO committee members. Some of them are part of PLC, the Parent Leadership Council. Some of them were actually just part of PTOs within their schools. And they came in, they participated in a food taste test. They were involved, they actually went through the rating portion of it. You'll see in the scores that there was some interest in one of the vendors, and that vendor is about 2.5, their largest school is about 2.5 sizes smaller than our school district, their largest district that they serve. And so I've had the opportunity to work with the parent members, as Ryan said, in working with Chartwells. They understand that we are going to move to much more frequency with that wellness committee. We had, during COVID, I think that we had just moved away from that in 2021. So we want to rebring that forward. They will meet with them frequently. There are some specific meal type items that Chartwells, and speaking, when I spoke with them, both area director, locally Dan, area director Jerry, and then another gentleman, regional director, agreed for some meals that we wouldn't have. The fun lunch at the elementary school is just not so fun. So they have agreed that we would not have the fun lunch. Anyway, had conversations with all families on that group, and they are willing to move forward. So the additional materials in the packet are Chartwell's actual bid documents for the cost reimbursable contract, and then the other item in the board packet is the actual Minnesota Department of Education contract template that we're required to use. And so based on that information, I will open up for questions.
I had one quick sort of random question. Is there any way to track food waste? And the reason I ask that is because I used to monitor the garbage cans at Creek Valley Elementary School, and the number one thing that the kids threw away were fresh fruits. And I think it's a great idea, and I certainly am a proponent of offering fresh fruits and vegetables to students. I want to make sure if we're charging more for our meals, that we're not just charging more for our meals and then it's going on the tray and getting dumped in the garbage. So I just didn't know if there's any way to make sure that kids are actually eating what we're serving to them.
OST's kids eat with their eyes, and so, that banana that you or I wouldn't blink at, they go, oh, well, there's that little spot right there, so we'll just.
So,
Now, it has, where we have, as far as a very specific way to track that waste, historically, we have moved down a path, I know from the facilities department, as far as tracking some of that compostable, that type of thing. From our standpoint, in our relationship with the district, we're starting to study some of the technology that's being used at other schools that's actually being used to generate like power for the school based on that type of thing. There's lots of cool stuff that can be created with that, but to your point, we have an idea based on kind of that, what we create in that compost, so to speak. But one of the things that I think that will be very helpful in this approach is being able to voice, if they're not eating it, let's not serve it. If raspberries disappeared, then in season, let's be in the raspberry business. We've taken the kind of the bold step forward of saying, okay, we'll be a partner with you from a financial standpoint on this. So, the alibi can't be, we'd lose money if we changed over to kiwi because these children won't touch these apples. Mm-hmm. And so it should be a very exciting item next year that hopefully, and that's obviously theory, that if you get the right foods in front of them, that we can attack that. I have no reason to believe we have extraordinary waste. I can just speak to what programs I know have been put in place and other elements that we're looking at in the future.
thank you.
And Erica, I was going to say, maybe that is an area where that PTO Wellness Committee can kind of come on board and problem solve at our individual sites. Because as a community, we've gotten on board with composting, or at least we've made some of those changes. That would be a good idea. And I don't know a topic out there that won't garner more attention or feedback than school lunch. So hopefully we have and I will tell you from reading my board packet today, I had 3 people at my house who wanted to give their individual feedback on the lunch program. So I think they'll be happy to hear there's some changes. So thank you.
Great. Okay, we'll now vote to approve the food service management contract and meal prices. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The food service management contract and meal prices are approved. Thank you for staying so late for this.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Appreciate it. Do I have a motion to approve policy 614?
So move.
Second?
Second?
Thank you, Dan. Julie?
Sure. So we have policy 614, the assessment plan, up for action tonight. There are no changes from our discussion that we had last month. Does any board members have any additional questions on this? No? Great.
All those in favor of approving policy 614, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Policy 614 is approved. Are there any committee updates from any board members?
We have one. Director Aram and I, you saw in the consent agenda, we sent through an update on the LAC work, the Legislative Action Committee from this year, kind of a recap of everything that took place, all the work, and just two things I wanted to note. One is the end of the session did not land where we had hoped it would in terms of our priorities. It's really unfortunate. And as the days go by, a special session that the governor would call at this point is looking less and less likely. So that's disappointing because there was bipartisan support for a significant improvement in the education omnibus bill. So that said, we are also excited about looking forward to 2022 and 2023. We did put a call out for committee members from the community. Dan and I conducted interviews with them, and we are super excited that we have a new LAC group. So I'm just going to say who it is. Catherine Gump, who is a community member. She served on the LAC before. Kate Quayles, who is a community member and with a wealth of information on advocacy work at the legislation already. And then we have two students, Sabi Mirzar and Sophia Dovell. I'm not saying that correctly. Sorry, Sophia. So both 11th and 12th grade students. So our first meeting will be in September, and we will hopefully hit the ground running and make some movement this budget year at the state. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Julie and Dan. Great job this year on LAC. I appreciate it. Any superintendent updates?
I do have a couple. I would like to start with, I have a few employee commendations that I would like to read that came to me towards the end of the school year. And this first one is for Amanda Scheimel-Fenig. And Amanda is a teacher at the high school. And Jenny Saxton is a parent and writes, "Hi there. I just wanted to thank you for the wonderful year of English and for your incredible support of my child. Your passion for the dedication to your students is evident and infectious. You also brought a joy into the classroom that was absent during COVID. Not an easy task. You sparked a drive and creativity in our daughter to take 2 English classes next year, as well as pursue writing opportunities outside of the classroom. It's excellent and invested educators like you that leave an indelible mark on your students. I know yours will be a name we continue to hear from our daughter as an inspiration on her academic and personal journey. Wishing you a wonderful summer and well-deserved break. Jenny Saxton." And then this is a commendation for Jessie Link at Creek Valley. "Jessie, thank you for an amazing year of 3rd grade. I know I'm repeating myself, but we couldn't have been more delighted that our son spent this year in your classroom. We are so appreciative of all you do for the kids. It completely exceeded any expectations or hopes we had for the year. Our son learned so much, and his personal social growth was so exciting to see. From day one, he felt comfortable in the environment and excited and engaged about what was happening. Each time we had the opportunity to meet with you, it felt like you really had a good understanding of who he is as a person and as a student. Thank you. Hardly seems enough. Wishing you and your family a wonderful summer. Maggie Grossman. And then, yeah, I have a couple more. This one is to Britt Thies, and it reads, "We just wanted to send a personal note to say thank you. Thank you to say thank you, thank you. Creek Valley welcomed our child back with open arms, and our child loves her new school. Thank you for everything. The girls had some bumps in the road, but navigated the waters well, and were both sad to see school end. And they were both sad to see school end today. As parents, we appreciate all you do. Thank you for making this year a success for both of our girls. Have a nice summer. Adam and Noel." And finally, this is to several people. Principal Dahlquist, Kirsty Wenner, Rosemary Rink, and Grace Hajort. Hello, Creek Valley team. We want you to know how grateful our family is for the masterful work you have done this year. You stayed with us, and most importantly, with our daughter through some rough straits while staying focused on all of the fun and amazing sides of her and holding her accountable for her behavior and learning. Not an easy balance, especially with a whole class and an entire school in mind. I don't recall loving K-12 school like I love Creek Valley. As educators and administrators, we have done it all, in my opinion. You have done it all, in my opinion. You are laser focused on developing and challenging the students intellectually and emotionally while keeping sight of the joy of the moment in being around these young minds. Hawaiian ice? What? Woohoo! I am so proud to be associated with Creek Valley, Mrs. Wenner, and Mrs. Rink. We will never forget you, like ever, smiley face. Please pass our sentiment and gratitude along to the school counselor who worked with our daughter as well. We don't have her email, but of course she has been an integral part in helping our daughter get unstuck at some critical times. Have a great summer. And then I'd also like, fresh off the press, I'd like to announce that Mary Wody and our communications department received an NSPRA award, National School Public Relations Association Award, for our website. There was so much work that went into that website. It was like someone said it was like birthing a baby. I think probably like quadruplets or something. And it is outstanding, and Mary hears from the community all the time, the difference that it has made in really connecting with our community and our community really feeling engaged. And so, again, kudos to Mary and her team for that. We are incredibly proud of them. Those are
That's
my
amazing,
announcements.
Mary. Congratulations. Yes, yes. Before we adjourn, I just want to mention that our boys golf team won the state title, first in the state. Our girls golf team got fifth in the state, and our boys rugby team got first in the state. So congratulations to all of those students. And with that, good news, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.